In 2013, the Obama administration announced a pivot to Asia, foreign policy strategic rebalancing of U.S. interests from Europe and the Middle East towards East Asia. Now, what does that really mean in this increasingly complex world? Joining us today is U.S. Ambassador to the Philippines, Philip Goldberg. As Manila prepares for the APEC summit this year, a lot has happened since the year that we spoke. The devaluation of the yuan impacted economic markets, including the Philippines. The conflict in the South China Sea pits the Philippines against China, with the U.S. smack in the middle. And on the week of September 11th, I also, of course, want to talk about global security, ISIS moves in Southeast Asia. A lot on your plate. Thanks for joining us again.
Thanks very much, Maria. It's good to be back.
Well, let's talk about the first thing that's right on the horizon, APEC this year. What do you expect to happen during this?
Well, there'll be 21 or so world leaders coming together in Manila. First, I have to say that the Philippine government, especially the Department of Foreign Affairs under Secretary Laura Del Rosario, Secretary Del Rosario as well, have been very good at putting together all of the senior officials meetings and cabinet members who've already come into the Philippines, sort of under the radar because everyone expects the world leaders to come in November. And put together a good substantive agenda too, one that fits the Philippines very well, but many of the issues that are important in the region. Issues like regional economic integration, small and medium-sized enterprises, resiliency and sustainable development, and also human capital, how to better promote human capital in different economies with a focus on women and people with disabilities and all kinds of efforts going on to try to build out the workforces in different, and also entrepreneurship in different countries and the region.
When you talk about resiliency, I mean, this again brings up climate change issues, right? Which is really relevant to us here. In terms of what you expect to come out of this, for the Philippines, what do you see happening?
I think that for the Philippines, it's a great opportunity to show off the economic dynamism that is going on. After all, APEC is primarily an economic organization. And so the Philippines at the moment is growing at a good clip. I know it's probably gone down a little bit from what people hoped would occur this year, but still doing well by regional standards. There are many clouds on the horizon, what's going on in China, and the slowdown in the world economy, what's happened in the stock markets recently. But the Philippines continues to grow. There's a dynamism here, and so it's a good opportunity for the government and for the people of the Philippines to show that off a bit, as well as during the build-up to the Manila meetings, showing off some great parts of the country like Boracay and Cebu and other alternative places to do business.
Do you think the Philippines can maintain this growth through the next year?
Well, I think so. I mean, I look at what the experts say, Standard & Poor's or other economic modeling groups, and they seem to think so, including the IMF. So I'm optimistic, and as I said, you just have to be here to see some of the dynamism going on, the building, the optimism.
What impact do you think the May 2016 elections could have on growth?
Well, I don't know who's going to win the election, so I can't really. We don't even know
who's really running, right?
Well, that too. But I think that the general direction is a good one, and that hopefully it'll be sustained by good policies.
Is there anything we could do that would be a step backwards?
Well, there are some things that we have seen and we've talked about in the context of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and the likelihood that that will go forward, and with a certain set of rules, certain set of different policies that will better integrate many of the members in trades and trade, environment, labor. And the Philippines, we think, if it is interested in membership at some point, would have to take certain steps to be eligible for it. So those are steps that would maybe attract more foreign investment, that might open the economy more. But those are decisions for the Philippines.
TPP seems to be right in line with what ASEAN is also asking for, this one ASEAN community that's supposed to go in December 2015. And yet
Right.
what we've seen in the region is that many of the countries, the two largest in Indonesia and the Philippines, have actually become a bit more protectionist. Is that correct? Or
Well,
not?
I don't know that it's correct, but what it does highlight is that it takes time for integration to happen. And it also requires that there be streamlining and coordination of policy and of law. And it takes some time. If you look at the European Union as a kind of model, it took quite a while to integrate a full community, and it's still a work in process in some ways.
December 2015 is ASEAN's real coming out party. Everyone says don't expect a big bang. What
Right.
can we expect, do you think?
Well, I think that there'll be a certain set of rules and policies that will immediately take effect, but it probably won't be nearly the percentage that people originally thought. But we're following it. We think it's a good idea. The more integration that takes place, the more ability the United States and other countries have to come into a region and have a uniform set of rules. It's easier for doing business. It's easier for businesses to understand when there's kind of one-stop shopping.
The tail end of the Aquino administration, how would you gauge its performance?
Well, we think that the Aquino administration has done many positive things in terms of its image in the international community. The
Yes.
idea of modernizing government, of taking on corruption, are all very positive developments. And plus, its very principled stand on legal issues related to the South China Sea in international policy. So I think that we've worked very well with the Aquino administration. Our assistance programs here through USAID
Yep.
and Millennium Challenge Corporation, and by the way, the Philippines has been made eligible for a second compact with MCC, the Millennium Challenge Corporation, are all indications that we're kind of thinking in the same way and pulling in the same direction. That we have helped support good governance, fighting corruption, and that's what this government has been trying to do. You know, I understand that there are differences politically and internal debates, and we don't get into that as diplomats for our good health. And so, but we do have a very good relationship with the government.
Is there something you think the administration could have done better?
I think that's a good question.
Well, you mentioned China. In a way, you know, the U.S. Is in the middle, or the Philippines is certainly looking at the U.S. to be a buffer against this huge China. EDCA has come along also.
You know, you said before, Maria, in the introduction about the U.S. being smack in the middle. I wouldn't quite put it that way. The United States is a treaty ally of the Philippines.
Yep.
And when President Obama was here in April of 2014, he said that our treaty commitment is ironclad, and Secretary Ash Carter, Secretary of Defense, has said the same very recently.
And he's very strong in his statements, actually.
He is, and so are many U.S. officials, because while we don't take a position on claims in the South China Sea and believe that those should be settled peacefully, legally, diplomatically, we do have a position on behavior and on what we see as non-rules-based, non-legal-based solutions. And that's what we've talked about in terms of reclamation and in terms of our pressing forward with freedom of navigation on the land, the air and the sea. So we've been very clear that that's what concerns us. And so I wouldn't say we've been smack in the middle.
What do you see happening in China? Why is China being so aggressive? I mean, we've been looking at it now for the past few years. Does it make better sense to you?
As an analyst, I could give you an answer
as an analyst, please, Mr. Ambassador.
As a diplomat, I don't know that I will. But there are a lot of factors that go into Chinese thinking. We saw the big parade on September 3rd the sense that China is a big power and a growing economic force in the world, and it's an expression of that. The new leadership in China, not so new now, but it is a new leadership, and some of the issues that go on inside China, I think all factor into what's going on. History, I think, for them probably figures into it as well. The idea that China has somehow been kept from doing things. But we look at things in the 21st century,
Correct.
and I think the Philippines does as well, and sees that there are issues and interests that belong in the 21st century, and those are ones that require us to work together, that require legal and diplomatic solutions, rules-based solutions, and not unilateral behavior, and not trying to create facts through reclamation. But doing things that are part of a region and part of our relationship together.
The U.S. certainly has had very strong words against Secretary Ash when he came through. Was so strong. I was so surprised about the words he had against China at that point. Rules-based, definitely. I guess in terms of its economic might, we've just seen the yuan devalue and really take down a lot of the emerging markets. Where do you see this leading to?
Well, we're all watching it very closely. There is a divide among economists, as is usually the case. Some believe that it is a natural economic downturn, and it doesn't mean that much in terms of the long term.
Right.
Others look at it a little bit more critically. And see, for example, the Chinese government intervention in the stock market, the devaluation of the yuan as being of more concern and of more immediate concern. Those interventions in the market, because those are sometimes hard to manage when you, on the one hand, have a system that is now very open and market-oriented, but at the same time have a very strong state intervention.
And where do you see it playing out?
Well, we're going to have to watch it closely. I don't pretend to know exactly how it's going to play out. It's obviously an economic downturn. There are less factory orders. There is less economic activity, which in the emerging markets means less call for China to purchase raw minerals, resources. So there's a downturn. There's no question about it. The real question is whether the fundamentals are going to be strong, and that's what we have to watch. And when I say fundamentals, the ability of China to have a downturn and not have to revert at all points into intervention, and whether or not it can sustain this politically as well.
We're certainly all watching it. From China, let's go to Syria, another favorite topic globally right now, right? The refugees in Europe, that young boy who face down on the beach, and what's going on. How would you assess where things are in Syria right now?
Clearly, the war in Syria has been one of the most impactful conflicts, at least since the war in the former Yugoslavia, in terms of refugee flows. And it's a tremendous human disaster. And we've seen these images from Europe that are heartrending. But also, I think the governments there, especially in Germany, taking in refugees at a much greater number, taking responsibility is something that's quite admirable. And we in the U.S. are starting to talk more and more about it as well. What can and should we be doing more? But the war itself and the conflict itself, while there are twists and turns, and at times it looks like the government, the Assad regime, is in more trouble or less trouble, the idea that the Russians may be getting more involved, all of these things and the different players who have come in. You have ISIS, you have al-Nusra, which is an al-Qaeda affiliate. You have Hezbollah and Iran backing Assad. and now maybe the Russians coming in more as well, which, as Secretary Kerry made clear over the weekend, is of great concern to us. And those are all very, very worrying in terms of it just continuing if the different factions are just doubling down on their bets.
Rock and a hard place was a year ago. This is kind of where the U.S. seemed to be when it was going into Syria. Has it gotten better? I mean, in terms of U.S. the way the U.S. is looking.
Well, we keep supporting those parts of the Syrian population that want to create something better, and also who originally opposed the Assad government.
Yeah.
But there are so many different groups there now with so many different interests that it's quite difficult to see where this or when this ends.
We spoke extensively last year about ISIS, and since then what they did is really go all out on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook. ISIS in Southeast Asia, I mean, can you tell us what's happening there? What does it look like?
Well, I think
now?
what's clear is that ISIS has looked at the international model that Al-Qaeda had, and in some ways is trying to recreate it. With regard to Southeast Asia, there is no question that there are Malaysians, Indonesians who have been found to be fighting in Syria. Filipinos we haven't seen up till now.
Lots of rumors, but
there are a lot of
nothing that
rumors,
is concrete,
but nothing
right?
concrete.
Yeah.
Nor do we see an organic relationship between ISIS and any of the groups here. We've seen rhetorical support from some of the groups here for whatever reasons that they may have. They may be looking for money. They may be looking for prestige. Why they think it's prestigious, I'm not completely sure, but in their world, maybe that is. So it is a situation that we have to watch, but it's not something that I think we need to be overly concerned about. There are still some international figures in the south of the Philippines, but from time to time reports that ISIS is trying to whip up sentiment in their favor. But again, what we I think need to think about in a global sense is how that social media presence generates lone wolves and attacks that have really no organic relationship, as I was mentioning, but instead has a relationship that is one of trying to inspire people to act on their own.
Is it still the ideology, or are they just feasting on feelings of loneliness and marginalization?
I think it's all of the above. I think it has probably a little less to do with ideology. I think if people stopped and thought about what it is that ISIS truly is doing and represents, that wouldn't be attractive, but rather it's wanting to belong to something, a sense of grievance, a sense of loneliness, a sense of something. But you know, we've looked at it a lot and tried to figure this out. And what we need to do, obviously, and it's true in the Philippine context, Southeast Asian context, and the global context, certainly true in the United States, is redouble our efforts to work together in law enforcement and intelligence and watch the social media to see what's happening out there, try to counter the message, but also be very vigilant.
Are governments in Southeast Asia reacting well to it? I mean, are they reacting proactively?
I think so.
Indonesia,
I think
Malaysia,
Indonesia, yes. I think they're reacting to it. I don't think they've been trying to say it doesn't exist or trying to do nothing. Here, it's a different issue, obviously.
Bangsamoro law is waiting in Congress. I guess what do you think will happen with the BBL, and pro or not, whatever gets passed or doesn't get passed, what impact could that have in this global landscape?
Well, what's positive clearly in the peace process, and the BBL is a piece of Philippine legislation, so I'm not going to get into that or comment on it. But by having a peace process And by having a group like the MILF, which is the largest insurgent group in Mindanao, come into the peace process is very important, especially if it can stick and their local commanders and others want to be part of the process. And a process of integration and getting away from conflict, all very important. And it takes one very important part of Mindanao out of that insurgency equation.
Yeah.
Now, we don't and have never treated the MILF as an international terrorist group, as we do Abu Sayyaf or Jamaat Islamiyah, which have international jihadist connections and ambitions. This is important with the MILF, and it's important also because of what the MILF or other groups there, especially any kind of breakaway groups from MILF, as happened with MNLF before,
Correct.
who join other groups that may have part of those international ambitions or create an environment
Safe haven.
where, for safe havens, as has happened in the past. We think that the situation is much better than it was 10 years ago. The threat has been much reduced. The ability of the armed forces of the Philippines is much better, but it's still an issue. And having the MILF and having a peace process is always good. But it also is important because of these other factors that we mentioned.
Do you think that I guess what's happening in the southern Philippines, connected to everything else that's happening in the world, is this, I guess I'm talking about, let me put it this way. An analyst, Rohan Gunaratna, called ISIS, compared ISIS to Al-Qaeda and said that Al-Qaeda was kindergarten compared to ISIS.
I don't think that Al-Qaeda is a small problem. It still is a problem. What's happened over time is that Al-Qaeda Central, the Al-Qaeda group in Pakistan, has been decimated. But franchises still exist. In Yemen, quite markedly. In North Africa.
Yeah.
And so they are still a dangerous group, and they still have some ambitions and ability to attack outside of their regions. Those franchises do. ISIS is a different kettle of fish.
But it's an evolution of the ideology, do you think?
I don't know that it's an evolution. It is so destructive, so inhuman, what they do, that I don't know that you can attribute it to ideology. I don't know how you would best describe it, except as barbarian, if that's an ideology.
Let me bring you back to the southern Philippines again. Do you see a scenario where peace can fail?
I think that clearly there are good faith efforts to try to salvage the peace process, and I think those are very important, and that's what people now should focus on. What is in play are the provisions in the BBL and how they are consistent with the underlying comprehensive agreement on Bangsamoro. And as long as they're in the same area, I think it should be fine. But you know, there are a lot of questions, and there were questions raised about the agreement, and that's for people here to figure out. You know, I don't really want to get into what is domestic politics.
Very interesting. Okay, let me wrap it all, and let's go back full circle to where we started, which was APEC. We talked about ISIS and social media, diplomacy and social media. I mean, APEC is here coming to what ComScore once called the social media capital of the world. Do you see greater involvement of the people in what is a high-level meeting?
Yeah, well, I thought you were going to ask the question whether my Twitter account would help beat ISIS. And I wish it.
I'm coming at you in all different ways, aren't I?
I wish it were, but you know, we all are using social media much more. President Obama just started his own Twitter account.
Yeah.
and I have a Twitter account at Goldberg. We have at U.S. Embassy. So we are using Twitter. We're also using Facebook. And so that one is facebook.com/Manila.US Embassy. That's my prompt. I have my teleprompter.
Very good.
Very low tech, but it's there. So we use social media to get our message out too, but it hasn't been tested, I think, fully about how much impact that's having. I know certain people like it, and here in the Philippines, social media is very active and lively, and people like to look at it, but what impact it has from a kind of policy perspective, I don't know.
Are there plans to use social media more actively during APEC? Would you know?
We'll use it, yeah.
You will?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Sure, we'll give it a try.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for
Okay.
going all around the world with me,
Boy, that
Ambassador
was,
Goldberg.
boy, I'm dizzy, Maria.
No,
After all that, I've been
they're-
traveling all around the world.
Aren't they all connected? And I think that's part of what we're trying to show is that one part, Syria actually has an impact on the Philippines, and southern Philippines may have some impact on China. It's an interesting time.
It is.
Complex.
These things are connected in a way, and the one thing for sure is you can't get away from the globalization of these issues, and that's absolutely true.
Sorry, I have to ask you, it is the week of 9/11. 9/11 defined so much of global security now. Do you see anything different this year moving forward?
I don't see anything that 9/11 per se means other than remembering those very tragic events as we do each year. The issues that we just discussed in Syria, we didn't mention Iraq really,
right?
which is very much connected
Or
to
Iran.
Syria, or Iran, but all of what's going on in the Middle East, in South Asia, those are now ingrained parts of our security. In terms of airport security, in terms of law enforcement, and
Right.
looking out at social media to see what's being generated. I think it's evolved and changed. We mentioned that Al-Qaeda has sort of, in a way, been eclipsed by ISIS in terms of its brutality, but also its ability to use social media and attract interest, and so it evolves, but it does go back to the idea that we are threatened collectively, all of us, by groups that want to do us harm and our way of life harm, and that we need to work together to try to counteract it.
A collaborative world. Thank you again. Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
We've been talking to U.S. Ambassador to the Philippines, Philip Goldberg. We've gone around the world. Stay tuned. You heard his Twitter account at @amgoldberg. I'm Maria Ressa. Thank you for watching us.